All right, everybody, this is 6.2, simple probability. All right, probability is measuring how likely an event will occur when all the outcomes are equally likely. Like flipping a coin, you have two choices, it's 50-50 chance, right? This is how this is kind of like set out. P is like probability. In the parenthesis, what's inside that is like the event, like what we want to know. What's the probability of an event to happen? Like, what's the probability? What's the probability of flipping a head if we're using one coin? Okay, so the probability, how we calculate that is the number of favorable outcomes. So we want a head. There's only one way to get a head. And then the denominator is the number of possible outcomes. So there's two ways to flip a coin. You can get a heads or a tails. So there's two possible outcomes. So the probability is 1 out of 2. Okay, we can also write that as a percentage. Okay, to do that, what we do is we just do 1 divided by 2. That gives you 0.5. But then we need to write it as a percentage by moving the decimal to the right twice. So you'd get something like this, and then we'll move it twice, and we'd get 50%. Okay? So 50%. The chance of flipping a head here would be 50%. All right. So sometimes it's going to ask you to write fractions. Sometimes we'll ask you to write down percentages. Sometimes we'll ask you to do both. So please make sure you do both. Otherwise, you'll lose half of your points if you only did one way. Okay, so here we're rolling a 6-sided die. Our outcomes are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So the total possible outcomes for everything is going to be 6. It's going to be out of 6. Okay? So here, what's the probability of rolling a 3? Well, there's only one way to roll a 3. So that's our, what's called, again, is our favorable outcomes, what we want. And our denominator is the possible outcomes. There's 6 ways to do it, to roll a die. Okay? So our fraction is 1/6. And then we want to write down its percentage. So again, we will use our calculator to do that. We'll do 1 divided by 6, and it will give you a decimal that is 0.1666 continuing, okay? But then we need to move the decimal twice. So our answer here would be 16, and we'll round, though, I'll have us round to 17. Okay, so maybe I shouldn't. It'll be 16.66, but we're going to round to the whole numbers, so that will give us 17%. Okay, all right. So let's do some of these others. So what's the probability of rolling a 6? Well, there's only one way to get a 6, and there are 6 possible outcomes. We could roll a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So again, we end up getting the same thing. Here we'd end up getting 17%. Okay. All right, what's the probability of rolling an odd? Well, how many ways can you roll an odd? Well, you have 1, 3, and 5. So there's 3 favorable outcomes, and there's 6 possible outcomes. So that would be, we want to write it as a decimal, as a percentage. So that's like 0.5 is the decimal, and then we'll move it twice, and we would get 50%. Okay, so 50% chance that you would roll an odd. I'm going to ask you not to simplify the fractions, though. With probability, it's important. I think it's important to know, like, there's a difference between. I guess what I'm saying is that if you simplify your fractions, then you lose some of the information, like how many outcomes there are, okay? All right, so what is the probability of rolling a 2, union 3? Okay, so union, if we're kind of talking about it this way, is that we will win if we roll a 2 or if we roll a 3. Okay, so union, another word that we can kind of use is or. So there are two ways to roll a 2 or a 3 out of 6. And then we would calculate the percentage. That would be like a third, or that's like 0.33. If we do the decimal, that's 0.333. We'll move the decimal twice. We'll round. So that would be 33.3, and then we will round to the whole number, so 33%. Okay. Let's talk about this one. So intersection is like the word and. So what's the probability of rolling a 3 and a 4 at the same time? Okay. So this would be 0 out of 6. There's no way that you can roll a 3 and a 6 with one roll. Does that make sense? So the percentage here would be 0%. All right, and then last one here, what's the probability of rolling a 1 or a 3 or a 5? So that would be 3 ways you can win out of the 6 possible ones. So that is the same as what we did above. That's 50%. Okay. All right, so here's just some other examples here. Let's see, what do we got here? You've looked at some of the flipping coin, but sometimes it's not as simple as that. So here's like an example where we could come up with some more probabilities using a deck of cards. So we have blacks, we have reds, we have different shapes, clubs, spades, hearts, and diamonds. Okay, so this is clubs, in case you're not, this is spades, this is hearts, and this is diamonds. Okay, these are called face cards. We have Jack, King, and King. So I think with that information, we should answer a lot of these questions. So what's the probability of picking, if you randomly select a card, what's the probability of picking a red? Okay, so a deck has, if we have 4 times 13, that's 52 cards, so the total number is 52. So what's the probability of picking a red? So the desirable outcomes would be half of them. Okay, so how many of that would be like 2 times 15. So that'd be 26 out of 52. Okay, here it doesn't ask for a percentage, so we'll just leave it as a fraction. What's the probability of picking a heart? Well, there are 13 hearts out of 52. What's the probability of selecting a 2? Well, there are 4 2s out of the 52 cards. What's the probability of king or ace? So there's 4 kings and 4 aces, so that would be a total of 8 out of 52. What's the probability of picking a king and a red? So do we have any kings that are reds? Yes, there's 2 of them. 2 out of 52. What's the probability of selecting a spade or a black? So spade are these, and black. So we do the union, so we take all of them. So that would be a total of 26. Probability of an even. Well, let's look at our evens. We have the 2s, we have the 4s, the 6, the 8s, and the 10s. So there's 4 of each of those. So 4 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Or you could just count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So 4 times 5 is 20. So it would be 20 out of 52. And then what's the probability of not diamond? So not diamond would be everything but the diamonds. So not those, everything else. So that'd be like, you could count them all or just realize that each suit has 13. So 13 times 3, 13 times 3 gives you 39. 39 out of 52. And then you could come up with the percentages, okay? But I'll save that for you to do on your homework. All right? So again, just a recap of what we did is when we're trying to find a probability, we need to figure out what are the possible outcomes and the probability, the number of outcomes we want is the numerator, and the total possible outcomes is the denominator. Okay, again, don't simplify your fractions. If it asks for percentages, make sure you do that. So let's look at your homework real quick. Right here. So for these ones, it just says write it as an unsimplified fraction. So no reducing your fractions. But here it says, here it's also unsimplified fractions. Unsimplified fractions. So I think that's it. So for all of these, you don't need to do any of the percentages. I guess I probably should have not done that. But when we get to the next homework, it will ask you to do fractions and percentages. Okay. All right. See you guys.